Today we're talking St. Paul, and I've got some favorite hotspots and some famous people to talk about. St. Paul is the capital of Minnesota and the second largest city. It has a colorful history complete with fur trading, mobsters, railroads, and streetcars, to name just a few interesting tidbits. The French, German, Irish, and Swedes were some of the early immigrants who settled in St. Paul. The original name of St. Paul was Pig's Eye, after Pierre Pig's Eye Parent, and while it would have been amusing to have the capital of Minnesota be Pig's Eye, the name was duly changed around 1841. When the Minnesota Territory was formalized in 1849, St. Paul was named the capital. Because of its location, St. Paul quickly became a trade and transportation center. In the olden days, that trade was mostly by steamboats on the rivers, and later railroads became the main mode of shipping things across the country. These days, St. Paul still plays a heavy role in commerce and industry. St. Paul has always placed importance on higher education, as evidenced by the numerous colleges and universities it supports. A few of the prominent institutions of learning are Hamline University, Macalester College, the University of St. Thomas, Concordia University, William Mitchell College of Law, now Hamline Mitchell, and St. Catherine University. Some of the famous people associated with St. Paul include the cartoonist Charles Schultz, who grew up in St. Paul, and as well as James J. Hill, who is known for his railroads, and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Charles Schultz is well known for his Peanuts cartoon that he drew for 50 years. And although born in Minneapolis, he grew up in St. Paul. He started by drawing a simple panel cartoon called Little Folks that was published in our local paper, the Pioneer Press. A couple years later, he started a 4-panel comic strip that he successfully published. And at the peak, Peanuts was published in 2,600 newspapers daily, and he drew over 17,000 comic strips. James J. Hill was also known as the Empire Builder. He bought a failing railroad, the St. Paul and Pacific Railroad, and greatly expanded it. He connected the Seattle to St. Paul as one of the first expansions, and over time, he also took control of the Great Northern Railway and Northern Pacific. These two companies ended up merging in the 1970s as Burlington Northern Railroad, and his legacy today includes the James J. Hill Reference Library, his Summit Avenue Mansion, which is now the James J. Hill Museum, and funding for several of the colleges and universities in St. Paul, like Macalester, Hamline, St. Thomas, and among others. F. Scott Fitzgerald was born in St. Paul, and even though he grew up mostly in New York, his family moved back to St. Paul, where he started writing at his school, the St. Paul Academy. He lived in the row house on Summit Avenue at 599 Summit, which is listed as a National Historic Landmark. He also has a theater in St. Paul named after him, the Fitzgerald Theater, at 10 East Exchange Street. He is named after Francis Scott Key, who wrote our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. St. Paul has 17 planning districts, which is 3 more than there are in the Hunger Games. Yes, I know 13 plus 3 doesn't equal 17, but in the Hunger Games, they don't count the capital as a separate district, and in St. Paul, they do count downtown as a district. I'll briefly talk about each of the 17 districts, starting on the east side. Dayton's Bluff is one of the older sections of town with lots of good examples of Victorian-era homes just a short distance from downtown. Dayton's Bluff features the Ham's Brewery, of which you may know from the land of sky blue waters. Also, Swede Hollow was located here. Swede Hollow was a neighborhood that was demolished because of the poor living conditions. On the east side, you've got Sunray-Battle Creek Highwood and Greater East Side, while on the north side, you'll find Payne-Phalen, North End, and Como. Como is famous for the Como Park Zoo and Conservatory, as well as the recently added water park nearby. Highland Park is on the western edge of St. Paul, and it's got the Highland Park Theater and several shops right alongside the theater. There was a Ford assembly plant here that was recently torn down and is in the process of redevelopment. Union Park is a combination of 3 historic neighborhoods: Merriam Park, Snelling Hamlin, and Lexington Hamlin. Merriam Park was one of the early areas to be settled because of the Canadian Pacific Railway subdivision, aptly called Merriam Park Subdivision. It was named after John L. Merriam, who wanted the neighborhood halfway between downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul. The nickname for McAllister Groveland is Mac Grove, and a lot of residents in this area are related to McAllister University, University of St. Thomas, and several other local colleges and universities surrounding the area. There are a lot of faculty and students that live here. Thomasdale, or as the locals call it, Frogtown. Its nickname, Frogtown, comes from the many frogs that came from the original swamps in the area. The northern edge of this neighborhood is bordered by what was the St. Paul and Pacific Railroad, now Burlington Northern, and is home to the ever-popular Mekong Night Market. Westside, not to be confused with the separate city of West St. Paul, is south of downtown. It's actually called Westside since it's on the west side of the Mississippi River. On a map, though, it actually looks more like it should be South St. Paul. But there's a separate city called South St. Paul. Confused? Westside has a number of trendy coffee shops and microbrews, including Bootstrap Coffee and Wabasha Brewing. West 7th is known to be the area of first settlement in St. Paul. It's the foundation of where the city started. In one of my other videos, I talk about how Pierre Pig's Eye Parent was kicked out of Fort Snelling and moved further downriver to settle at Fountain Cave, which is in this neighborhood. This neighborhood is also where Schmidt Brewery produced 1,200 barrels of beer annually. Downtown, or as in the Hunger Games, the Capital District. Downtown St. Paul is situated on the Mississippi River bluffs and features the Minnesota State Capitol and several other attractions such as the Ordway Center for the Performing Arts, the Science Museum and the Children's Museum, the Minnesota History Center, the Xcel Energy Center, and the Union Depot. There is a skyway system that connects various buildings within downtown. One of the unique features of downtown St. Paul is the district energy heating system. This energy supplier heats and cools buildings via hot and chilled water. A good portion of the energy is derived from sustainable sources, raising the sustainability of the buildings connected to it. One of the iconic landmarks is the Landmark Center. It was originally completed in 1902 and served as a post office, courthouse, and customs house for Minnesota. It's also on the National Register of Historic Places. There are a number of areas and destinations St. Paul is known for. Let's explore some of them. Grand Avenue is a mecca of restaurants and shopping in St. Paul, and there are so many various types of shops along this 5-mile stretch, but most of it is concentrated around Victoria and Lexington. And once you've done shopping, there's plenty to eat. You'll find locals such as bread and chocolate, cafe latte, and the Lexington, or if dessert's more your thing, just truffles, Grand Ole Creamery, treats, and more. Right next to Grand Avenue, you'll find Summit Avenue, a street that overlooks downtown. This spot on the bluffs made it popular for the wealthy people of the day that many built mansions along the street. Some of the notable homes on Summit include the James J. Hill House at 240 Summit, F. Scott Fitzgerald House at 599 Summit, and the Minnesota Governor's Mansion at 1006 Summit. Keg Case. This building was part of the Schmidt Brewery facility back in the day, and in 2014, this building was purchased with the idea of converting it into a destination food hall. They called it Keg Case because Schmidt Brewery stored their beers here before loading them onto trains to be delivered. Now it's a great place to meet with friends. The James J. Hill House Museum. This home was built for James J. Hill, the railroad tycoon often called the Empire Builder. It's a Richardsonian Romanesque mansion with about 36,000 square feet of space. It was unusual for a house to be lit with electricity, but Hill had electric lamps. The house had its own electrical generation plant, and because sanitation was very important in the Victorian era, this home featured dual sewer systems to guard against contamination into the kitchen. Other notable features include filtered air that came in through tunnels, hot steam in the downspouts to combat ice dams, and a pipe organ? How many houses have a pipe organ? And how long does it take to clean 13 bathrooms? Gangsters. John Dillinger and Babyface Nelson are among the notorious gangsters that spent time in St. Paul. This was most likely because the police chief, John O'Connor, had an agreement with criminals at the time. As long as they bribed the police, they could stay in St. Paul. And be sure to check out the gangster tour that starts at Wabasha Caves. By now you should have a better understanding of St. Paul, and you should be thinking, I should subscribe. I would be happy if you subscribed and clicked the notification bell as well so that you'll be notified of other videos like this. And if you're planning a move to the Twin Cities, reach out to me and we can get started.